The ashes are still warm underfoot when 17-year-old Maya Reeves kneels in the blackened soil and opens her palm to reveal 6 seeds. 6. That's all that's left after the wildfire took everything her grandmother built over 40 years. The cabin where Maya learned to bake bread from scratch, gone. The barn where they stored tools passed down through 3 generations, reduced to twisted metal and charcoal. The orchards that produced apples, pears, and cherries every fall, now nothing but skeletal branches reaching toward an indifferent sky. The gardens, 5 raised beds that fed them year-round with tomatoes, squash, beans, lettuce, and herbs, buried under inches of suffocating ash. The Forest Service told her to leave, said the land was ruined, that nothing would grow here for years, maybe decades. One ranger, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes and a clipboard, had put her hand on Maya's shoulder and said, "Honey, nature will reclaim this eventually, but you can't live here. There's nothing left." But Maya's grandmother taught her something. Before the smoke took her, words whispered on a porch the night before the evacuation order, when the sky glowed orange and the wind carried the smell of burning pine. Seeds don't need permission to become forests, Maya. They just need stubbornness and soil. Remember that so Maya stays. One knife, her grandmother's old fixed blade with the worn leather handle that somehow survived in the root cellar, 6 seed packets in a metal box, and a will that refuses to break, that refuses to accept that destruction gets the final word. What grows from this scorched earth over the next 7 months will prove that destruction is never the end. It's only the clearing before something stronger takes root. Maya's story doesn't begin with the fire, though. It begins the way so many mountain stories do, with loss compounding loss until you're buried under it, suffocating, wondering if you'll ever breathe freely again. Her parents died in a car accident when she was 12, a drunk driver crossing the center line on a rainy November night outside Asheville. One moment Maya was a normal kid with normal problems, worried about math tests and whether the boy in her English class liked her. The next moment, she was an orphan being told by a social worker that she'd be going to live with her grandmother, Eleanor, in the Blue Ridge Mountains. Grandma Ellie, as everyone called her, was a legend in the small mountain community scattered across these ridges, a woman who grew 90% of her own food, who bartered vegetables and preserves for everything else, who knew every plant, every season, every trick the mountains could teach. She'd lived on this land for 40 years after her own husband died young, raising Maya's father alone, turning 40 acres of rocky soil into a paradise of productivity. She was 78 when Maya arrived, small and wiry and tough as the hickory trees that dotted her property. For 5 years, Maya learned at her side. Not the way you learn in school from books and lectures, but the way humans learned for thousands of years, by watching, by doing, by failing, and trying again. How to start seeds indoors in February, tiny tomato and pepper seeds pressed into soil in recycled egg cartons on the sunny windowsill. How to harden them off in March, moving them outside for longer periods each day so the transition wouldn't shock them. How to companion plant, tomatoes with basil to repel aphids, corn with beans and squash in the traditional 3 sisters method that fed indigenous peoples for centuries. How to save seeds from the best producers, selecting for vigor and flavor and resilience. How to read soil by texture and smell, knowing when it needed compost or when it was perfectly balanced. How to read weather in the clouds and the wind, predicting rain or drought days in advance. How to identify pest patterns and deal with them without chemicals. How to can, pickle, ferment, dry, preserve the abundance of summer for the scarcity of winter. It was the education no school could provide, and Maya absorbed it like the rich soil absorbed spring rain. She went from a grieving city kid who didn't know a tomato from a pepper plant to a capable young woman who could grow, harvest, and preserve a year's worth of food. She learned to butcher chickens without flinching, to split firewood with an axe, to fix a broken fence with wire and stubbornness. But more than skills, she learned philosophy. Grandma Ellie's philosophy of self-reliance, of respecting the land while working with it, of understanding that nature doesn't care about your plans, but will reward your persistence. But this past August, everything changed. A lightning strike during a brutal drought, the kind that leaves the forest tinder dry and desperate, started a fire on the ridge above their property. It spread faster than anyone predicted, jumping fire breaks, consuming thousands of acres in hours. The evacuation order came at dawn, sheriffs driving up the mountain roads with loudspeakers, telling everyone to leave immediately, take only what you can carry, go now. Grandma Ellie refused. Maya found her on the front porch, sitting in her rocking chair with a shotgun across her lap, not threatening anyone but making her position clear. "I'm 83 years old, Maya," she said, her voice calm as still water. "I was born in these mountains. I've lived on this land for 40 years. If this land goes, I go with it." Maya tried to drag her out, screaming, crying, begging. But Ellie was immovable as the mountains themselves, small but anchored by a lifetime of roots. "Go to town. Stay with the Johnsons. They're expecting you. Come back when it's over. I'll be here or I won't, but either way it's my choice." Maya left, looking back at her grandmother standing on the porch like a captain going down with her ship, surrounded by the garden she'd tended for 4 decades. The fire burned for 3 days. The smoke was visible from town, a massive column that turned the sun red and made the air unbreathable. When they were finally allowed back, Maya walked up the mountain road alone, her heart hammering, hoping against hope that somehow Ellie had survived. She found her grandmother's body in the garden, in the tomato section, a wet cloth over her face surrounded by the vegetables she'd been trying to save by watering them against the advancing flames. The coroner said smoke inhalation, that Ellie had probably lost consciousness quickly, that she hadn't suffered. Maya said heartbreak, said that Ellie's heart broke when the flames took her tomatoes, and she just decided to go with them. The funeral was small. 30 people from the mountain community, most of them old-timers who'd known Ellie for decades. They told stories about her generosity, about the time she'd given the entire congregation of the tiny mountain church fresh vegetables for a month when the pastor's family was struggling, about how she'd taught half the women in the county how to can properly, about her stubbornness, her humor, her absolute refusal to compromise on things that mattered. The community rallied around Maya, offered her a place to stay, money, resources. The Johnsons, an older couple who ran a small farm down the valley, said she could live with them as long as she needed. The pastor of the church said there was money in a discretionary fund to help her get back on her feet. But at 17, nearly 18, Maya was technically old enough to refuse foster care, and she did. "I'm staying on the land," she told the social worker, a young woman who looked barely older than Maya herself. "It's mine now. Grandma left it to me in her will. I'm not leaving." The social worker tried to argue, listing all the reasons it was impossible. No shelter, the cabin was gone. No water source, the well pump had melted. No electricity, the lines had burned. No food, the gardens were destroyed. No way for a teenage girl to survive alone on burned land with winter coming. Maya didn't argue back. She just waited until everyone left, accepted the tent and camping gear the Johnsons pressed into her hands, and walked back up the mountain road to the ruins. The first week is about survival, not growth. Maya camps in a tent at the edge of the burn zone where a few trees survived, their bark blackened but their cores still alive. She hauls water from a creek a half-mile down the slope, 5-gallon buckets that leave her shoulders aching. She eats what little she brought, granola bars and canned beans and instant noodles cooked over a small camp stove. She walks the land every day, assessing the damage, trying to inventory what's left. It's worse than she imagined. 40 acres of blackened stumps and ash, the trees reduced to charcoal fingers. The cabin, where she'd lived for 5 years, reduced to a stone chimney standing alone like a monument, and a charred foundation. The barn, completely gone, just twisted metal and ash where it had stood. The greenhouse, where Ellie started seeds and grew lettuce through winter, now a twisted skeleton of melted plastic and bent metal framework. The orchards, 30 fruit trees that produced hundreds of pounds of fruit every year, all dead, their branches raised like skeletal hands, begging for mercy that never came. The gardens, 5 raised beds built from salvaged lumber and filled with decades of enriched soil, buried under inches of ash that choke out any life beneath. Most people would walk away. The land is ruined. Start over somewhere else, somewhere that doesn't smell like smoke and death, somewhere with potential instead of devastation. But as Maya walks through the destruction, forcing herself to look. At every corner, every burned building, every dead tree, she starts to notice things, small things, things that suggest destruction isn't complete. The ash, while suffocating now, is rich in minerals. She remembers Ellie teaching her about wildfire ecology, about how indigenous peoples used controlled burns to enrich soil. Wildfire ash is nature's fertilizer when managed correctly, full of potash and phosphorus. The soil underneath, once she clears the heavy top layer, will be more fertile than before. The creek still runs clean and cold, fed by springs higher in the mountains that the fire never reached. The well is damaged, but the structure is intact, just needs a new pump. And most importantly, in the root cellar, which was built partially underground and lined with stone, she finds survivors. The root cellar door is half burned, but it opens. Inside, the temperature is cool, almost cold, and the air smells of earth instead of smoke. Shelves line the walls, most of them collapsed, jars shattered, their contents spoiled. But in the very back, behind a makeshift wall Ellie had built to protect her seed library, Maya finds treasure. Hundreds of jars of seeds collected over decades, traded with other gardeners, saved from the best producers each year. Most are heat damaged, the jars cracked from thermal stress, the seeds exposed to moisture and smoke. But in a metal ammunition box, military surplus from some long ago war, she finds 6 packets that survived intact. Tomatoes, Ellie's favorite variety, a Cherokee purple heirloom that produced massive fruits with complex flavor. Squash, a butternut that stored well and provided calories through winter. Beans, Kentucky Wonder Pole beans that climbed and produced pounds of protein. Lettuce, a cold, hardy romaine that could survive frost. Carrots, a Danvers variety that grew long and sweet in their rocky soil. And sunflowers, massive Russian giants that grew 12 feet tall and produced heads full of seeds for eating and planting. 6 seed types, maybe 100 seeds total. It's not much. A handful of potential pressed between paper packets. But it's enough to start. Ellie always said you didn't need much to begin. A single seed, she'd say while they sat on the porch shelling beans, contains everything. The genetic code, the life force, the potential for a whole plant. Respect that. Work with it, and it will feed you. That night, sitting by her campfire at the edge of the ruins, Maya makes a decision. She's not leaving. She's not starting over somewhere else. She's going to rebuild here on this land, using only what she has. Her knowledge, everything Ellie taught her. Her knife, the one tool that survived. Her stubborn refusal to accept that destruction is permanent. She's going to prove that life returns, that gardens grow back, that her grandmother's legacy isn't ash. The work begins in February, when winter is starting to loosen its grip, but spring hasn't fully arrived. Maya moves her tent closer to the ruins, setting up near the stone chimney, because it provides some windbreak and a psychological anchor, a reminder that things can survive fire. She starts clearing ash, the first step in resurrection. Using a shovel, she found half melted in the barn wreckage, its handle burned away, but the blade still functional with a new handle she fashions from a branch. She begins removing the top layer of heavy ash from where the garden beds used to be. It's brutal work. The ash is dense, wet from winter snow, heavy as mud. It gets in her lungs despite the mask she fashions from a t-shirt, making her cough black phlegm. It gets in her eyes, stinging and blurring her vision. It coats her skin, mixing with sweat to create a grey paste that she can't fully wash off with creek water. Days blur together into an exhausting routine. Wake as the sun rises. Eat sparingly because food is limited. Clear ash for hours. Haul water, collapse into her sleeping bag as darkness falls. She loses weight she can't afford to lose, her already thin frame becoming gaunt. Her hands blister, the skin splitting and bleeding, then slowly callous into something tougher. She finds small treasures in the ruins that make her cry with relief. A few unbroken mason jars, their glass somehow surviving the heat. A rusted but functional hoe, its blade intact. Nails bent but usable. Wire melted in places but salvageable. And most precious, her grandmother's trowel. The wooden handle burned completely away, but the metal blade intact, bearing the scratches and wear of 40 years of use. By early March, she's cleared 3 of the 5 garden bed locations. The soil underneath is compacted but alive. She digs deep, finding earthworms pale and vulnerable, proof that the soil ecosystem survived beneath its suffocating blanket. She begins the slow process of turning the soil, incorporating the ash gradually, rather than removing it entirely. She remembers Grandma Ellie's lessons, her voice clear in memory. Ash is pure potash and phosphorus, Maya. Too much burns plants, killing them with excess salts. The right amount makes them thrive, giving them the minerals they need. Mix it in thin. Test, adjust. Listen to what the soil tells you. She tests by planting a few bean seeds in small patches with different ash concentrations. Waits, watches. The patch with heavy ash produces nothing. The patch with no ash grows slowly. The patch with moderate ash, maybe 1 part ash to 4 parts soil, produces vigorous growth. She's found the formula. Water is the next challenge. The creek is half a mile away, too far for daily watering once plants are established. She needs the well functioning. The well itself is intact, drilled 50 feet into bedrock decades ago, but the electric pump melted and there's no electricity anyway. Using money from odd jobs she picks up in town, cleaning the church, hauling firewood for older residents, anything that pays cash, she buys a hand pump, manual, simple, mechanical. Installing it takes 3 days of frustration. The threading doesn't quite match, the washers are the wrong size. Her hands are too weak to tighten the bolts properly. She strips threads, has to start over, wants to scream with frustration. But on the 3rd day, bleeding from multiple scrapes and close to tears, she pumps the handle and water. Rusty at first from old pipes, then clear and cold and perfect, flows out. She sits on the ground and cries, not from sadness but from relief so intense it's painful. By late March, she's ready to plant. But not directly in the ground. It's too early, too cold still. The mountains can see snow through April. She needs to start seeds indoors, but she has no indoors, so she builds one. Using scavenged lumber from the barn wreckage, burned on one side but structurally sound, and salvaged plastic sheeting she finds in the hardware store's damaged goods bin, she constructs a small cold frame. She builds it against the stone chimney, using the thermal mass of the stone to moderate temperature swings. So that's crude. Barely 4 feet by 8 feet with a hinged lid she can open on warm days and close at night. But it works. She fills it with soil she's carefully prepared, enriched with creek silt and moderate ash warmed by the stone. She plants half her precious seeds, 6 tomato seeds, 8 squash seeds, 20 bean seeds. Covers them lightly, waters them gently, closes the lid, and waits, checking 3 times a day with the nervous energy of someone who knows everything depends on this. The first sprout appears on April 3rd. A tomato seedling, 2 tiny cotyledon leaves emerging from dark soil, green as hope itself. Maya kneels beside the cold frame and stares at it for 10 minutes, afraid that blinking will make it disappear, that it's a hallucination born from desperation. But it's real. Life returning. Proof that seeds survive fire, that growth follows destruction, that her grandmother was right about stubbornness and soil. Over the next 2 weeks, more sprouts emerge. Squash, their large cotyledons pushing up forcefully. Beans quick and vigorous, their stems strong from the start. She plants the second half of her seeds directly in the cleared garden beds under row cover fabric. She buys with her last bit of cash, lettuce and carrots that can handle cold. Within days she sees the straight green lines of germination, organized rows of life in dead land. But success brings new problems she hadn't anticipated. Animals drawn by the new growth in the otherwise barren landscape start raiding. She wakes one morning to find deer have jumped the low barrier she'd built and eaten her lettuce down to nubs overnight. 2 days later, rabbits dig under the row cover and destroy half her carrot seedlings. She loses a quarter of her precious seedlings before she figures out protection. She builds better fencing from salvaged wire, digging it 6 inches into the soil to stop rabbits. She sets up a scarecrow, crude but effective, made from her grandmother's burned coat stuffed with ash and mounted on a pole. She sleeps in the cold frame some nights, her body wedged in next to the seedlings, waking every few hours to any sound, chasing away intruders with shouts and thrown rocks. It's exhausting, but it works. The community starts to notice. Hikers passing by on the trail that runs near the property see the bright green of new growth emerging from the burn zone. Word spreads through the valley. That Reeves girl is actually growing something up there. She's not giving up. Ellie would be proud. Some people help. Old Mr. Chen, who runs a small farm 2 ridges over and knew Ellie for 30 years, brings her a 50-pound bag of finished compost. "Heard you're trying to bring it back," he says simply, unloading it from his truck. "This will help." Mrs. Johnson, who keeps offering Maya a room in her house, donates seedlings she started extra, peppers and herbs. The hardware store owner, a gruff man who rarely smiles, starts setting aside damaged tools he can't sell. "You can use these more than the landfill can," he tells Maya. Others criticize. She hears it in town when she goes for supplies. She's wasting her time. That land is dead for years. Fool kid is gonna starve before summer. Someone should make her leave. It's dangerous. Maya doesn't respond to either group. She just keeps working because that's what Ellie taught her. When people doubt, prove them wrong with results. By May, her 3 garden beds are full of life. Tomato plants, now 8 inches tall, climbing stakes she made from burned branches that are dead but still strong. Squash vines spreading across mulched paths, their large leaves already beginning to shade the soil. Bean plants twining up a trellis she built from salvaged wire and poles, climbing toward the sun. Sunflowers transplanted from the cold frame, already 3 feet tall and standing like sentries around the garden perimeter. The lettuce and carrots in the 4th bed are ready for harvest, full and lush. She picks the first lettuce leaves on a May morning, tender and green and perfect. She makes a salad with nothing else but water and the smallest pinch of salt from a shaker she found in the ruins. She eats it slowly, sitting on a stump, tasting not just the plant but the victory. It's the first food she's eaten from this land in 9 months. Here it tastes like resurrection. June brings heat and the first real test of the system she's built. A drought settles in, the kind that turns the sky white with haze and makes the mountains shimmer with heat. Temperatures climb into the 90s day after day. Unusual for the mountains, but increasingly common. The well keeps producing, thank God. But Maya has to water twice daily, hauling 5-gallon buckets to each bed in the morning and evening. It's exhausting work that leaves her shoulders aching and her hands cramped. She's wrecked physically, losing weight again despite eating the vegetables she can harvest, surviving on lettuce and early carrots and oatmeal she buys in town. But the garden grows. The tomatoes set fruit, small green globes that appear at every branch junction. The squash produces massive yellow flowers that attract the few bees that have returned to the area. Then tiny green fruits appear, swelling daily in the heat. The beans climb and flower, white blossoms that become slender pods. She picks beans every other day, eating them raw because she's too tired to cook. Their crisp sweetness better than any meal she's ever had. Mid-July, disaster nearly strikes. She notices damage on her tomato plants, leaves stripped overnight, and initially thinks deer have somehow gotten past her fencing. But closer inspection reveals the real culprit: hornworms, fat green caterpillars as long as her finger, perfectly camouflaged against the stems, eating voraciously. These things can strip a full-grown tomato plant in 2 days. She finds them by flashlight at night when they're most active, their bodies glowing slightly, picking them off by hand. There are hundreds of them. It's disgusting work, the worms squirming in her grip, but it saves the plants. She learns that survival sometimes means doing the revolting thing without hesitation. August arrives, and with it the memory of the fire exactly 1 year ago. Maya spends the anniversary alone at her grandmother's grave, which she marked with a flat stone she found in the creek, and carved with Ellie's name and dates using a nail and patience.
She tells Ellie about the garden, about the challenges, about the small triumphs.
She doesn't cry. She cried enough in the months after the fire. Instead, she makes a promise. "I'm going to make this the most productive land in the county, Grandma. Not just recover it. Make it better than before. Just watch me." The garden responds as if it heard the promise. The tomatoes ripen in abundance, the Cherokee purples producing fruits that weigh over 1 pound each, their deep purple-pink color exactly as Maya remembers. 30 fruits, then 50, then 100, more than she can eat. She starts preserving, canning salsa and sauce using jars she's collected, and a propane burner she bought with money from selling extra vegetables in town. Their squash produces massive fruits, 10 pounds, 20 pounds each, winter varieties that will store for months. She barters them for rice, flour, canning lids, essentials she can't grow. The beans dry on the vine, their pods turning brown and crisp, providing protein she'll need for winter. The sunflowers tower 12 feet tall now, their massive heads heavy with seeds. She harvests them in late August, roasts some for eating immediately, saves the rest for planting next year. By late August, 1 year after losing everything, she's preserved over 100 jars of food. Tomato sauce, salsa, pickled vegetables, dried beans. Her root cellar, which she's cleared and repaired, is stocked. Not abundantly, but enough. She's proven it can be done. Land can come back. Gardens can grow in ash. Her grandmother's legacy isn't dead, but she's not finished. Not even close. September brings cooler weather and new possibilities. With her summer crops winding down, she plants a fall garden. Kale, turnips, beets, spinach, all cold hardy crops that will thrive as temperatures drop. But she also starts thinking bigger. Next year she'll need more space, more production. She starts planning, sketching in a notebook she bought. She'll clear all 5 original beds, plus expand to 10 total. She'll plant fruit trees, young ones from the nursery replacing the ones that burned. Apples, pears, cherries, the same varieties Ellie had. They'll take years to produce, but that's fine. She's not going anywhere. She'll rebuild a small cabin, nothing fancy, just shelter with a wood stove for heat. She'll install a rainwater catchment system, reducing her dependence on the well. She'll make this land not just survive, but thrive. The community notices the change in her. At 18 now, legally an adult, she's no longer the grieving kid they worried about. She's competent, focused, thriving in a way that commands respect. People start asking for advice. How did you bring that soil back? What do you do about pests organically? Can you help me start a garden? She teaches what Grandma Ellie taught her, passing the knowledge forward, and it feels right. This is how it's supposed to work. Knowledge shared, multiplied, preserved. October brings harvest. She digs up carrots as thick as her wrist, their orange color brilliant against dark soil. Pulls beets the size of softballs, their earthy sweetness perfect for roasting. The fall greens are lush, frost sweetened, better than anything she's ever bought. She makes a feast. Roasted vegetables, fresh bread she learned to bake in a Dutch oven over coals, herb tea from wild mint she found growing near the creek. She invites Mr. Chen, Mrs. Johnson, the hardware store owner, a few others who helped when she had nothing. They sit on stumps around a fire pit and eat food grown from ash, and someone says, "This land was supposed to be dead." Maya replies, "Land doesn't die, for it just waits for someone stubborn enough to wake it up." By November, as the first snow dusts the mountains and the growing season ends, Maya walks her land and takes inventory. 3 garden beds fully productive, with clear plans for 10 next year. 200 jars of preserved food in the root cellar, 50 pounds of dried beans, 20 pounds of sunflower seeds, half for eating and half for planting. Enough to feed herself through winter with surplus to sell or barter. A small shelter framed and ready for walls, just basic protection but a start. Well, that works. Soil that's richer now than it was before the fire, enriched by ash and hard work and knowledge applied correctly. But more than physical things, she's gained something she didn't know she'd lost. Purpose. For 5 years after her parents died, she'd been drifting, just following her grandmother's lead, learning but not truly choosing. The fire and grief could have destroyed her completely. Instead, it forced her to discover her own strength, to choose actively rather than just follow. She's not just Ellie's granddaughter anymore. She's Maya Reeves, the girl who grew a paradise from ashes, the girl who proved that destruction isn't an ending, just a transformation. One evening in late November, she stands at the edge of her garden as the sun sets behind the mountains, painting the sky in layers of orange and purple and gold. The garden beds are mulched for winter, sleeping under layers of straw and leaves, but not dead, just resting like the land itself. In her pocket are seeds saved from this year's harvest, hundreds of them carefully dried and labeled. Next year's beginning already secured. She thinks about her grandmother, about those final moments when Ellie chose to stay with her land. Maya understands now in a way she couldn't before. It wasn't about the plants or the property or stubbornness for its own sake. It was about refusing to let the thing you love burn without a fight. It was about believing that some things are worth dying for because they're absolutely worth living for. She pulls out the 6 original seed packets, now empty and worn, their paper soft from handling. She'll keep them forever, a reminder that sometimes everything you need to start over, everything you need to build a whole new world, can fit in your palm. The wildfire took the structures, the trees, the gardens that were, but it couldn't take the knowledge Ellie poured into Maya over 5 years. It couldn't take the seeds, hidden in a metal box in a stone cellar. It couldn't take the stubborn will to begin again. Those things are fireproof. As stars emerge overhead, brighter here in the mountains than anywhere else, Maya whispers to the land, to her grandmother's spirit, to herself. Year 2 starts in February. We're going to need more garden beds. And for the first time since the fire, she smiles. Not a sad smile, not a determined grimace, but a real smile. because she knows now what Ellie knew all along. The land always returns. Life always finds a way, and when you pour knowledge and stubborn love into soil, what grows back is always stronger than what burned. If Maya's story of rebuilding from total destruction moved you, if the idea of growing paradise from ashes resonated somewhere deep, hit that subscribe button right now. Turn on the notification bell so you never miss these stories about mountain resilience, about people who refuse to let loss define them, about the stubborn power of seeds and soil and human will. Leave a comment and tell me, what would you grow if you had to start over with nothing but seeds and stubbornness? What would your 6 seeds be? Would you choose food or flowers or something else entirely? And share this video with someone who needs to know that endings are just clearings before something stronger takes root, that destruction is never permanent, that you can always begin again. Thank you for listening. I'll see you in the next story.